Why don't we move on to the Chief Executive report? Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Malcolm. I will be fairly brief, given that a number of the items that we're going to substantively discuss are things that I would otherwise have referred to, particularly the STP process and some of the performance issues at the start of the new financial year. But firstly to say, we obviously now are in a position to take stock of the 2015-16 performance across the NHS as a whole, and there's absolutely no doubt that this was a very pressurised year. We will talk in detail about that in the item that Richard will be discussing. I do think it's, however, worth reflecting that the performance of the NHS in England in 2015-16 still, I think, on the headline measures, compares very favourably with that of any other major industrialised country's healthcare system. The fact is that 9 out of 10 patients being seen within A&E in 4 hours is a remarkable achievement. The fact is that 9 out of 10 patients having their operation in under 18 weeks is something that we would have found staggering even 10 years ago. The fact that 1,000 or so people are waiting 52 weeks compares with the 200,000 people who were waiting a year for their care when I joined the NHS in 1988. So we've come on an enormous distance. We should pay great thanks to the frontline staff across the NHS who are delivering these kinds of performances under very difficult circumstances, none of which is to deny that actually, particularly towards the end of the year, as we will come on and discuss February, March, we saw increasing pressure and real stress in parts of the service. So the question then is, what are we doing about that in the year ahead? What does 2016-17 look like? We go into this year in a much stronger financial position as the National Health Service as a whole. The front-loaded spending review settlement means that for the first time in a number of years, the tariff prices that are paid to hospitals will go up. The cost pressures in the system around pensions and other aspects have been funded. The efficiency requirement has been set at a more realistic headline level. However, we have spent the last 4-6 weeks in a complex situation, ensuring that the level of activity that is being planned and funded through the health service is at realistic levels for both emergencies and for routine operations. And on the back of that, I think have made enormous progress in almost every part of the country now, with agreements finalised for both local CCG commissioned activity and for specialised activity in the vast majority of cases. I think we're in a better position as we sit here in May this year than we were in May last, and I think we feel confident that the deficits that have been reported will come down very, very substantially during the course of this year compared to last, and together with NHS improvement, the agreements that they are entering into with individual trusts should secure improved A&E performance by next March compared to the position that we've just seen this past March. However, the fact is that the individual organisational financial plans, despite having moved in the right direction over the last month or 6 weeks, there is still work that NHS Improvement have underway with the trust sector to ensure that there is a balanced plan going into the year, and Jim Mackey will be updating their board at their public meeting on that today. It means that over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks, NHS Improvement will be having more detailed conversations with trusts about what their control totals need to be, so that we go into the year with a balanced position, and such contingency as there is can be used genuinely for pressures that arise unexpectedly, as against for an imbalanced position at the start of the year. That is not going to be a completely straightforward exercise to ensure that people are able to have control total plans that they can easily deliver. Nobody underestimates that, but the fact is we have seen very substantial cost growth in a number of areas over the course of the last 12 and 24 months, and we're going to have to tackle some of that at source. More broadly, the process that Joe Lenihan will talk us through around the local conversations, the 44 local conversations on the sustainability and transformation plans, I think are hugely encouraging in that the NHS, partners in local government and other parts of the care system are now having very frank and constructive conversations about the big changes that will be necessary in order to put us on the track to deliver against the three aims of the forward view: improved health and well-being, improved care quality and redesign, and financial sustainability. We'll hear more about that from Joe, but that is going to be an absolutely essential process to get right between now and the summer break, and then the subsequent process into the autumn. A couple of other items. I think we had a strong launch of the GP forward view with a good concrete set of proposals, both to help support GPs now as well as to make some of the wider and more profound changes in primary care that everybody can see is required. Of course, this is not the only set of things that need doing. It's not the final answer to all of the pressures in general practice, but if implemented effectively, I think the consensus view, including from the Royal College of GPs and indeed the leadership of the General Practitioners Committee, is that this has the potential to make a huge difference for patients and for GPs. And so Arvin, Madden, Ros Rowton and our partners now, sleeves rolled up, get going on implementing that. This morning the National Audit Office have published an important report on the impact that delayed discharges are having on the NHS, pointing once again to the pressures that have been building in social care. At the time of the NHS 5-year forward view, obviously we pointed out that the ability of the NHS to deliver was highly interrelated to the continuing availability of a well-resourced and well-functioning adult social care system. There are ways in which that interface can be improved, and the STP process is part of the conversation for doing that, but there are some broader unresolved issues in respect to social care that clearly the country will have to come back to. And then finally, Malcolm, just to mention a couple of other points that have arisen in the last few days but which may not have received the attention they deserve. We spent a lot of our time talking about pressures in A&Es and other elements of the work of the health service, but of course the reality is that what the NHS does is far, far wider than that. And so two things just to bring to the board's attention. Firstly, within the last week or so, we've just published the latest cancer survival data, and you will see that further improvement in cancer survival rates, both 1 year and 5 year, at an all-time high now. Your survival chances are now 70% within a year of having a cancer diagnosis and treatment, compared with 60% slightly over 10 years ago. And this morning, publication of important data around improved antimicrobial prescribing by GPs. Obviously, at a time of a lot of pressure in general practice, it's still hugely encouraging that we saw a 7% reduction in prescribing for antibiotics that weren't required, and a 16% reduction in broad-spectrum antibiotics, given that antibiotic resistance is one of the huge health threats facing all countries' healthcare systems, killing 50,000 people a year in Europe and the United States. This shows that the NHS actually is a world leader on tackling antimicrobial resistance. So just two very specific slivers, but illustrative of a much broader story about the things that are happening across the National Health Service that often do not get the focus and the attention that they actually deserve.
Simon, thank you very much for that report. May I invite any questions from members of the board? No, if not, thank you, Simon.